So here's a complete run through of a many-to-many relationship. I have a scenario here drawn out in my model where we have users and groups, and this is a common use case. Each user can belong to many groups. So we've got a one-to-many, and then in the reverse, each group can also contain many users. So to create a many-to-many relationship without duplication in our data, the main concept you want to understand is this center data store class here. Some call it an associative data store class or a join class. I'll use a join class as a term because it's easier to say, but convention I've seen in other places is to just call this join data store class a combination of the two classes that it's joining. So I just call it user group. You can call it whatever you like, but that's a convention that I've seen used. So the way you set up a one-to-many, or a many-to-many, sorry, is very simple. You create a one-to-many, so from user group to user. You can see here that we've got our many in the user data store class. And then likewise, we're going to do a one-to-many from user group to groups. So we've set up two relationships, and what it's described as is you're basically going through this table to get your relationship. To access all of the groups that this user is part of, you create an alias attribute. So be careful here because I've got similar names. This is an uppercase, which is the convention for a data store class, and this is lowercase, which is the convention for an entity. So I'm using the entity dot group. So it's going to go through here and get all the related groups. And likewise here on users, we're using user groups, which is this attribute dot user. So it's getting all the associated entities from the user group and then listing all the associated users. So let's look at server-side script to see how you would create relationships. So what we're going to do here to create a many-to-many is essentially you're making an entity in this user group that's going to describe the relationship. So let's go to our code. It's pretty simple. First part here, I'm just clearing out the data store so that we're starting from scratch. I'm making two users, one named Bob Barker and one named Billie Jean King, and saving them to the data store. Then I'm making two groups, group 1 and group 2, and saving those. So we have two users, two groups. Next, we're going to add group 1 to user 1. I should actually put here user 1 to group 1 to make more, I think it makes more sense. So we're adding user 1 to group 1 using the join class. So we're going new user group, so we're creating an entity of the user group data store class. We're creating the user is user 1 and the group is group 1, and we're saving that. So what you've done is you've just created an entity in the user group data store class that's describing a relationship between those two entities. Next, we're going to have both user 1 and 2 belong to group 2. So we've got user 1 belongs to group 1, and user 1 and 2 are both going to belong to group 2. So user 1 will belong to both groups. So what we've done here is again create two user group entities, and we've chosen user 2, or sorry, I've got it wrong here. User 2 is going to belong to both groups. User 1 is only going to belong to group 1. So you can see we've got user 2 getting assigned to group 1 and group 2 and saving them. So what we'll do at the end here is we're going to just verify that our user groups are being created properly. So I'll run that. And you can see there's our three user group entities as we would expect. So we've got the user and the group, and this is describing the relationship. So let's go to the browser. I'll reload this. And here's our data. So you can see this is all of the user groups. So we've got three of those, as you saw in the server-side console. And here I've got a user data source along with a relation data source listing the groups that the user belongs to. So you can see Bob Barker belongs to one group, Billie Jean belongs to 2. And that's how we designed it. And likewise, I have a groups data source, group data source, and an associate or a related entity on the user. So group 1 has both, group 2 has just the one user. So you can see it's operating. Let's add some new ones. So this will be user A, user B, and user C. And then let's go, so you can see they belong to no groups. And here we'll go group A, group B, and group C. So now I'm going to demonstrate some code on how you create these relationships and remove the relationships. So the first thing we're going to look at is doing it on the server side. So we'll take Billie Jean King, and we're going to assign the selected group to Billie Jean. So she's going to be part of group A, and I'm going to do it via the server. So you can see here it added group A, and also group A now has Billie Jean King. And you can see that it added Billie Jean King and group A as a user group entity. So the way that I did that was a server-side method. So let's take a look at that. So let's go to our index, and we did it via the server. We'll go to events on click. So here's the client-side code we used to accomplish this. So we first decided, okay, is there any groups in existence that we need to actually perform this operation? So if that passed, which it did, we go in and we call an entity method on the server side called add group, and we're passing in sources.group.id, which is the source for the selected group, which is here. So we're sending in that as a parameter, and then we've got an on success afterwards that we're just updating all the views and doing server refresh on the affected data sources. So this is it. It's an entity method. So if we go to the server-side code, which is right in here, so we've got user, entity method, add group. So when you do an entity method, remember, this is scoped to the current entity because we're coming through a data source and applying this method. So we're going to take the current entity of that data source, and that will be what is scoped to this keyword. So we've got our group ID here as a parameter. So what we're doing is we're first finding the group with the ID that was sent in. So we've got our group that we want to assign. Then we're checking, is there already a relationship set up? Because we don't need to create duplicate data. And if it's not existing, so if there's no current entity that fits this exact description with the match of that group and that user, then we create a new user group with the user is this, and the group is the group that we found earlier. We save it, and we return true. So back on the client side, you can see, like I said, if event.result equals true, which is what was returned, then we update the sources, and that's what updates the actual view. Okay, so let's go back to the live version. Let's take Bob Barker now, and let's assign him to group B. And this time we're going to do it without calling, basically on the client side, using data sources. So I'll click on it, and you can see Bob Barker gets added to the group, and the group gets added to Bob Barker, and we've got our new user group entity here. So if we go back to Studio, that was done in this button here. So if we go to the on click of that button, you'll see that I'm working with data sources here. So I've checked first again if the data source, if the groups actually has a group to assign. Then we're taking sources.usergroup.addNewElement, so we're adding a new element to the user group source, which was that represented in the longer list on the right here. So you can see here my data sources. I've got group, which is here in this grid. I've got user, which is, user in this grid up top. Group is in this lower grid. We've got user group is in this dark grid, and then we've got the two relation attribute data sources which fill in the related many. So we use this button to do it client side. Like I said, we went add new element to the user group data source. Then we did a set for both the user and the group. So I've assigned the current user from the current entity from the user source and the current entity from the group source, and I've set those to the current entity of user group. And then we've saved it, and on success we're refreshing. So I've worked completely through data sources to create a new entity and save it to the server, and then updating the view. And that's how that one works. There's no server methods on this one. It's all within the functionality of data sources. So one thing I want to cover here, we're going to talk about removing, is you want to watch for one thing. If we go here to this, just thinking of the best way to do this, let's go back to our code generation and let's go to this. So we're going to erase everything we've done, but I'm going to make an intentional mistake here. I'm going to duplicate this relationship exactly. So we're now going to have two of this same relationship. So we're going to have, and I'll show you what actually the effect is. Sorry, I need to run that script. So I'll run it. And you can see here now instead of 3 we have 4 entities in the user group data store class. So we'll go to the client, reload, we'll have our refresh data. We've got 4 elements here, but you can see here that our relationships have not changed. And what Wakanda does on the server side is it ignores duplicates automatically. So this one gets ignored. It's not included in this many-to-many relationship. Now, personally, I like to keep things clean, so you'll want to ensure that when you're removing a many-to-many, you've got one of two choices. Really be careful that you're not creating duplicates in the first place, or whenever you remove a relationship, do so via a query versus a find, and I'll show you what I mean right now. So I'll correct this back because I'm going to post this project on GitHub. So let's go to the remove. So first let me show you that it works. So we've got Bob Barker is part of group 1. We're going to remove him using a server-side method. Bam, done. And he's no longer part of group 1. So Billie Jean's part of both, but let's take Billie Jean and let's remove her from group 1. So you see group 1 go here and you'll see her disappear out of here. Done, and it's removing out of here. So how did we do that? So we'll go to this via server. Events is going to be very similar. So remove group from server. First we're checking that there's groups to remove, and then we're going sources.user.remove group. So remember, we're doing an entity method because this is a server-side method, and we're passing in the group ID that we want removed. So very similar to the last one. So if we go to our model, remove group, here's the server-side function. We've got our group ID parameter. We're finding the group the same way, and then we're looking for any matches. Now you'll notice here in comparison to the add I was using a find, which returns one entity. The remove group does a query, so we're actually going to get an entity collection here. And if the entity collection has more than 0 entries, we're going to remove every entity in that collection, and then we're going to return true. So back on the client side, where were we here? Right here. On success, if event.result equals true, then we update our data sources to get the view current. So that's a look at the server side. And you can see it's very similar to the way we were adding. And likewise, you'll see, let's go to here and let's make sure that the client side is working. So we've got Billie Jean King. I'm going to remove her from group 2 using the client. There we go. So we actually have no relations left. And let's see how that one works. So we've got client side removal. Go to on click, and you'll see here what I'm doing is I needed to use the data provider versus data sources alone. So I'm checking the length to make sure we have a group to remove. And I'm creating an entity collection client side called join collection. And this is querying for all user groups with the same type of scenario on the server side, with the user ID equal to the current user, the group ID equal to the current group, and then it's on success. So this is important. We're passing in parameters here. So if you haven't done a asynchronous query using parameters, this is the syntax. You're passing in your query string, and then in an object params you have an array with your arguments, and then an on success is a function. So after the join collection has been established in the on success, now we remove all entities, and then on the success of remove all entities, we're going to update all of our data sources. There's one thing I wanted to show you that I probably am just better showing you in the documentation. So if you go to server-side API, data store, introduction, and defining queries on the server side, you'll see down towards the bottom there is queries in end-to-end relations. And this is probably a good section for you to read. There's a special notation. They're using actors in movies in this example. But if you want to find, for instance, a movie that had any number of actors, you use a notation that's documented right here. So I'll leave that with you to read. That's many-to-many relationships. I hope it helped, and good luck with it.